you could, could you take us back 40 years to accepting that position and who you were and who was the conservancy back then? And
well, yeah, it's a great story. And it, you know, like you say, I came on board, the organization was 15 years old. And those first 15 years was an incredible time for the organization because it was the founding of a 501c3 and all of that entails. It was a time when the river wasn't in very good shape. You know, there were some stretches that were beautiful, and the rest of it was kind of trashed. The kind of you know, sort of some people, it was like water. When you look at the riverbank, water heater, junk car, and water heater. Because back in those days, you didn't have Lowe's and Home Depot and all these others would come and say, okay, we'll replace your water heater, we will take your old one. That system hadn't been quite set up yet, so what do you do with an old water heater? Well, some people say, well, let's throw it in the river, which is, you know, hard to imagine these days. But, and you know, during those first 15 years, you know, the organization's trying to figure out, you know, how do you protect a river? 100 miles long, 5 counties, 20 townships, 12 municipalities. So how do you start to get your hands around, your head around how you do that? And I said, well, let's first get some official recognition that this river is important. How do we do that? Well, we were well connected. The founder, Glenn Thompson, well connected with Washington, D.C. He was a newspaper editor there in Dayton. And so he decided, well, we're going to get some national designation. And it turned out that he gets a call from Senator Lauschie at the time, who was a big, powerful senator here in Ohio back then, that said there's new legislation being considered called the National Wild Scenic Rivers Law. And Glenn said, we need to have a little Miami in that, you know, let's make sure, and sure enough it was, which provides some level of protection. And then with that discussion, it was natural to say, well, maybe the state of Ohio needs that kind of legislation. And Glenn was instrumental in getting the state's scenic river law passed. So it was a matter of getting these things designated. And it wasn't simply, well, I'll just write you know, the governor says, okay. It took gathering together public support, political support locally, getting people to sign on. And again, back in those days, who were your local politicians in the city of Cincinnati? Who was mayor? Jerry Springer. So, you know, it's all those dynamics going on as to how you get it done. But it got done actually in different sections. It took about actually 13 years. The last section was brought into the national system in 1980.
So the work is not overnight, obviously. You've seen that over 40 years of service. So
well, it is. It's an ongoing process.
So
Absolutely.
Speaking on that note too, and the legislative work that you had to do, you had a battle to get the job, I understand.
Well, there was a lot of competition back then.
Do you remember any of the competition?
Well, I happened to, when this was maybe a year or two after, and they said, well, there were 200 people applied for the job. And then later on, I found that one of the people that applied was Rob Portman. Young guy, didn't have his law degree, said, you know, I love the outdoors, and so on and so forth. And I still kid Rob, you know, I said, you know, I think it still worked out okay.
Yeah, I was going to say the different paths and that you guys went on and everything. That's pretty wild, though. So, I guess Eric then versus now, do you think? Did you understand then, or any thoughts then that you'd be in this for 40 years, or what all it would entail?
Not at all. Not at all. I had no idea, because when they hired me, the organization hired me, they asked me that question, how long do you think you're going to be around? I said, well, ask me in a couple years and I'll give you an answer. And then a couple years turned into a couple more, and here we are.
Exactly.
You know, it's been a labor of love, and a great organization, a great active board, lots of really tangible accomplishments to point to over the years. So it's just been, I just smile when I think back over what's happened for the river over that 40 years.
There's been a lot. We're going to get to some of that. Guys, if you're joining us, like I said, this is it's been an ongoing fundraiser that we've been doing. Our first really attempt at a virtual fundraiser that's been going well. We'll get to some of the successes. At the end of this, we're going to draw some raffle winners. And so if you bought some tickets and you're stay tuned, otherwise we'll contact you later. But you can always support the Conservancy in a number of different ways. For one, we still have our Patagonia Collaborative T-shirt for sale with proceeds going to the Conservancy. They have several publications out, like the Smallmouth Sunny book that helps them out, or
Great children's book, yeah.
or jump on the website and make a donation, and you can of course do that at any time. Eric, what's the website?
www.littlemiami.org.
littlemiami.org, and help them out in all the great work that they do. So you can do that at any time. So there's no doubt that you're leaving a legacy. So to touch on that, we hinted about some of this during the first interview. But you pointed out, maybe not so discreetly, and you're wearing a different piece here today with a little logo on it as well. But so through RRT's partnership with Patagonia, we've been working on securing a major grant for the 2022 year. And we're excited to announce,
Yes.
I believe, right?
Yes, we are.
That grant has come through.
That's correct.
And Patagonia is donating $15,000 for the 2022 fiscal year for the Conservancy.
Absolutely, and that grant allows us to partner, the Conservancy partner with Adventure Crew. And so there will be a lot of young people out on the river doing conservation work in 2022, from inner city and underprivileged kids, and just a wonderful effort. And Adventure Crew, of course, they're top notch too. So we're happy to have the funding to make all of that come together.
Just to make it even more exciting that you're using some of the money with Adventure Crew, one of our other favorite, partner organizations.
Absolutely.
And there's so much benefit to go around from that. Patagonia, who's donated in years past, this brings it up to $36,000 to the Conservancy from Patagonia. So I wanted to say a thank you to them as well, what they do for our local
And
community.
some of that initial Patagonia money was used to take a dam out of the Little Miami, up on the upper river, so they contribute in so many ways. It's a wonderful partnership.
I love it. And so, going back to the Adventure Crew too, education has been a staple for the LMC and outreach. So things like Adventure Crew, the book that we mentioned. What else can we expect? Is there anything else we can expect from the Conservancy? Ways of publications? Are we going to see maybe an animated series? What can we see come around?
There is a bit of that now. If you go onto our YouTube channel, Reminding Conservancies, you will see a video version of Smallmouth Sunny, both in English and in Spanish. And so that's available, and people are welcome to view that. But in terms of education programs, I mean, you have to learn about the river, you have to experience it, to appreciate it and love it, and the old song about you can't want to preserve something until you are aware of it, at least. And so our education programs have been expanding over the years. We have an education outlet, if you will, at our river center there in downtown Loveland, next to Mr. Park, along the bike trail, which we'll talk a little bit about the bike trail too. And another partnership with Raptor Inc., where live hawks and owls, and not a bald eagle yet, but we've got a way around that. So just great opportunities to educate the public about the river, and of course our speaker series and all the things that we do to reach out and tell people about the river.
I love that. And I know that with Smallmouth, like even going around to classrooms originally and reading the book and starting that awareness.
Great reception, and we will, and hopefully we'll get back to be able to go into schools, classrooms. Every student walks out with a free book and take it home and enjoy it. So I was at, where was it, some store not too long ago, and all of a sudden I hear this little voice, a little said, "Aaron the Heron." And I look around, there's this little type who saw the logo on my, on the car.
Yeah.
And recognized it, and his mother came up behind him and said, "It's one of his favorite books, So, who knew?
What a
lasting legacy that
would make me so happy.
The next 30
recognize
years being
yeah.
executive director of the Conservancy or something like that. Who knows?
Crowning achievement, being called out for kid recognize the Heron on the
parking lot.
I love it. I want to talk about more of your time on the river. Do you have, curious then, just like skipping from all the work that you've done, gotta have a favorite section on the river. So where does Eric go?
I do not.
No?
You know, as strange as that sounds, each section that you look at is unique.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the lower river, wider, slower, long pools, beautiful vistas. When you get up into the middle sections of the river is narrower, some of the forests are coming right down to the river's edge. Beautiful fall colors. You know, and then you're up into Greene County and Clark County, and particularly Greene County, you know, Clifton Gorge. What's not to love there? That's just fantastic. So each section has its own sort of unique natural call-outs that say, well, this is gorgeous.
Should have expected that as an answer. Like, you didn't want to sell any part of the river short. Not playing favorites with anybody.
No need to.
They're all good. So many of your days on the river, I know, have been with cleanups.
Yep.
So for the river cleanups, what about some more interesting finds?
Yeah. And thanks to RRT, what a great partnership, you know, on the clean sweep that we have with you all.
It's been great for us.
It's worked wonders on the river. But yeah, people say, well, what's the most interesting thing you've ever found on the river? And I say, a tombstone. And people, you got it, kids will find. I said, yes, we found a tombstone. And it was in good shape. It was
You make it out?
It was from 1800s. It was well done.
Yeah.
Because you could read it clearly. And it was I think McCracken was the name on it. So I Googled the name and the exact name on the tombstone, and it comes up. There is the same name person up near Cleveland. So I called him up and I said, I'm so and so. I'm a conservancy. We do this. We happen. And I said, I've got great news. I have found your tombstone. And he just roared. And he said, yeah, that's an ancestor of mine from Southwest Ohio, and they came down and got it. Now the question, how did that wind up there?
You don't know where it originated.
That gentleman was a resident of the Greene County Upper River section. And who knows? There's just no way to know. It's got to be an interesting story. You could probably make one up.
Yeah, we'll work on that. Oh, maybe a book is in your future, a retirement little novel or something.
So many stories, and it just everyone along the river has an agenda, has a story, has a favorite story to tell about their childhood along the river. You never see an end to those kinds of beautiful stories.
Yeah. Very cool. I feel like it's one of those, because we're not just looking at it as physical attributes as a river and so much of that going on, but you see it as so much more as a community and having personality in each town along the way, having that personality to follow.
And 100 years ago, there were groups of cottages, and it was a real social gathering spot. Whether it be in Terrace Park, you'll see old historic photos of big, long, they almost look like Italian John boats. It's interesting. And with ladies in their long gowns down by the river, and a beautiful photograph here in Milford, actually, same kind of thing, where the photo was taken in 1917, so over 100 years ago, and a young man with his son sitting next to clearly a homemade John boat, right out here by the river, just downstream from the bridge, looking downstream towards Centerville. You could make out where this was.
We pulled out some homemade boats from river cleanups as well. Well, probably not as nice as what you were seeing.
But again, you look on down the distance in the riffles, there's ladies standing in long dresses. I don't know whether it was a Sunday, picnic or what it was, but just, those kinds of stories make you think, this river's been appreciated and loved by lots of people over well over 100 years.
Right. Wow. Cool history to it too.
Yeah.
So, long history. What do you see in the future? As you kind of set aside, where do you see the river, or where do you see the conservancy going if you were to design it, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Sure. The river has come so far, just in my, experience, and really, obviously from a geologic standpoint, a very short period of time, but we've come so far with regards to back in the days when the river was polluted, heavily polluted. There were dead fish floating down the Old Man, which, people can't hardly believe that. It was real, and it was the impetus towards reducing nutrient loading and the kinds of things, the algae blooms that were happening on the river. The river was running green, thick green, and So all of that, you know, the nutrient loading's been ratcheted down, the treatment plants now treat for phosphorus, they didn't back then. So now you have a beautiful river that's in exceptional health. Been studied, science studies by Ohio EPA and others to really confirm that this river really is in exceptional health, which to Ohio EPA means it's in the top 10% of streams in Ohio. There's a healthy fish population, macroinvertebrates, the bugs that live under the rocks, and the whole biology is in great shape. The exception to that is back, 30 years ago when all this stress was put on the river were the mussels, the freshwater clams. There were 36 different species they think that inhabited the river at one point, and those are still suffering in terms of they haven't recovered, I'll say. And there's talk about, well, maybe there's a worldwide virus, and maybe there's, who knows, but they're still under study by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They're doing massive amounts of studies around the country. And that will be a big emphasis in the future, in the near future for the Little Miami. And we have met with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They have a great lab with the Kentucky Department of Natural Resources down in Frankfurt. I brought something actually. In the coming year, you will see, if you would imagine this is made out of styrofoam, the real version will be made out of concrete. So it'll be a dark gray. And if you can tell, there's a lid, perforated lid, and inside of this is a tube. Mussels, live mussels, will be provided by the Fish and Wildlife Service and Dr. McGregor and Wendell Haig out of Frankfurt. Those will be placed. These will be placed in the river next year. There'll be 4 of these placed in any particular location, probably maybe 20 locations along Little Miami. Then we'll come back in a few months and see if the mussels are still alive, if they're still healthy, and if they are, that's great, because that means that the stresses on the river aren't so much that mussels can't survive. We think they can. We find mussels along the river, and at that point, that's phase 1. And these are called missile silos. They're called mussel silos, and they're made out of concrete. They'll literally just be there. And if you do happen to see one in one of your rivers next year, please leave it there.
Probably won't notice it.
You may not. You may not. And so, if that works out well, then we'll be talking with Fish and Wildlife and others about reintroduction of mussels. Actually, bringing mussels in to reintroduce. So, mussel reintroduction next year is
prove that it can work.
It's kind of to be sort of the final stage in restoration of the biology of the Little Miami.
Right.
So there's that. You look at a lot of what the organization has done over the years, and that is acquiring these riverfront lands, what they call the riparian zone. And so we've bought up a lot of lands. All lands have been donated to us by individuals, by developers, and so that work continues. If you look at the entire Little Miami, about 56% of the whole length of the Little Miami riverfront has been formally protected. A lot by the Conservancy, some by Ohio Department of Natural Resources and local park districts, etc. So that work continues. And next year, in 2022, we'll be restoring about 2 more miles of the Little Miami, the former farm fields. The farmer says, yeah, I think that sounds good. Let's do a riverfront forest prairie zone. So that'll be continuing. We're buying a 90-acre wetland along the Little Miami that runs for about half a mile on the river. So that kind of habitat protection and restoration work will continue and will continue, for a long time.
It's a lot of wheels in motion. What is it that with the mussels that why is that? Explain everyone. Why is that like the biggest? Why is that so important, or how is that?
Sure, it's part. When we look at the river, we look at the entire biology of the stream, and we say let's try to bring it all back. And this is that one part of biology that's sort of been a lagging factor. And there, years ago, the mussels were popular because they were taken out of Little Miami, and many streams and buttons were made out of them. So if you see some really old vintage clothing, you may see a button made out of a mussel. But it's part of that biological picture that we think is important and will continue throughout.
You were talking about some of the land acquisition too. Talk about how important that is, and the difference between the preserves and the easements.
Sure. There's different ways, and anyone that's involved in a land trust knows this by heart, and that is you can own land. Sort of how you protect the environment. We do it the old-fashioned way. We own it. We purchase it and preserve it. And then some owners, some family farms, for example, have been around for a couple hundred years now. Say, well, I want to keep the land in my family, but I still want to preserve it and make sure that it stays preserved beyond our immediate lifetime. Then a conservation easement makes sense. Those are restrictions that are placed on the deed. They last forever. They run forever. And so that's another way to do it. So we own, a couple thousand acres of riparian zones along the river. About a third of that is in conservation easements.
Okay. You have some options.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, other options involve, partnering with local park districts. Great Parks of Hamilton County is a great example, where we went in years ago in the 70s and 80s and bought up properties. So properties that you'll be aware of: Bass Island, Avoca Park, the railroad, the Penn Central Railroad. All of these were initiatives by the Conservancy back then to say, this is a good idea, this bike trail idea. We don't know how popular it will become, but we'll do it even if it's not popular, and it helps protect the river. So we went to Washington, went to Columbus, raised $2 million, which was a lot of money back then, still is, but to buy the 45 miles. And that was bought by the state, and then there were 2 more miles that politicians couldn't seem to agree should be part of the bike trail. That was a section from Terrace Park down to Plainville. It was like local politicians said, no, that cannot be part. We've got some transportation ideas in mind for the eastern corridor and this area of the river. So no. So we stepped forward. We weren't government, or not government. We stepped forward, raised the money, and went ahead and bought it. And said, it's going to be a trail. It's going to be a bike trail. And so, and then eventually, as was the case with the Avoca Park and with Bass Island, eventually then sold that property to Great Parks of Hamilton County. That money then went right back into our land acquisition fund. We rolled it into buying up more riverfront. All from willing sellers. We're not government, we don't have the power of government anyway. So all willing sellers. And we've done this over 100 times all in Old Miami. So
I get thinking up because you talked about just the algae blooms across the river and the health of it, and that's a river that I'm fortunate to not know. I'm fortunate enough to know the river that is clean, that is healthy, that I get out there and enjoy on a regular basis as I'm able to, and so much of that work is done.
yeah.
We gotta make sure we don't go backwards.
Well, and
so much of that work is done.
That gets, again, what's coming up in the short term on Old Miami, and that is, I always tell the old story ad nauseum about, you go to the doctor and says, you're in excellent health, you're doing great, but I want to keep an eye on you, I want to monitor you, and that's a lot of what we're doing. This I brought this. This is a monitor that we place in the river. We have 9 of these along the main stem, and they monitor dissolved oxygen. If you have to monitor one thing, you can only afford to monitor one thing. Monitor the oxygen. Every fish, every bug, every piece of life below the water level needs oxygen. So we monitor that. And let me take the cover off. Like I say, we've got 9 of these up and down the river, and these were there's water. Let's keep that vertical. These were donated by Yellow Springs Instruments, YSI, now a part of the Island Corporation, out of Yellow Springs, Ohio. One of the founders was one of the founders of the organization back 54 years ago, by the name of Dave Case, and he and his successors saw to it that they donated this very expensive equipment so that we could be out there monitoring their samples are being taken every 15 minutes on the river on 9 locations, so that we can really track what the levels is. Oxygen levels typically will vary throughout a 24-hour time period from when the sun's out and maybe some growth, so a little bit of algae left in the river producing oxygen, photosynthesis. At 4 a.m. there's no sunlight. That algae is starting to break down and oxidize and use up oxygen. So you get this curve going, and this measures that. And the trick is that you keep the oxygen levels from going too low, and you keep that fluctuation from being too much. And all of this, it sort of always surprises people that, to protect the health of the river, we're talking parts per million in terms of oxygen levels. It's not, it's not a lot.
Right, very fragile.
It's very fragile. That's how sensitive this river is to being, dead fish versus exceptional health in parts per million.
So this thing is out there and it's firing back. It's connected to a system that's firing back all these data points.
Right.
You're able to tell where and when.
And again, great partnerships with Groundwork, ORV, and Central State University, who provide the graduate students to help maintain these. It's just been a real blessing to have YSI and others to support the system, because it really, nobody else is, interestingly enough, no one else is out there measuring every 15 minutes. The requirements as they're set up right now by local state treatment plant operators is to take a grab sample once a month. Well, that's great, but what happens on the other 29 days? Well, we don't know.
So do you see this as a model or other conservancies?
We hope so that local governments will adopt this. For us, it's expensive. For local governments, Michael said, we can work that into the budget. We are getting some interest from Warren County and Greene County to implement this system. But this will allow us to know what's going on just like that at any point in time throughout the day.
There you go. I'm going to confuse this for my cup of wine. There you go. So we've done. I'm going to skip a little bit here from what I had done, but you're a pretty huge one-man show. Just because I feel like we just bounced a lot of things. Education. We talked about conservation, water quality monitoring, habitat and species protection. We didn't even get on the floodplain management, land acquisition side of it, volunteer coordinator, grant writer.
Yeah.
Next time you complain about too many responsibilities in your job, come talk to this guy. You're the only employee at LMC.
The only full-time, yes.
Correct?
Yes.
So that's a lot. What's the hardest part of your job?
Yes, I never really thought about it that way. It all helps the cause, so it's all great. The most enjoyable, let me reverse that. The most enjoyable part is going out along the river, standing there with some of our board members or supporters or landowners or even developers and talking about the river. There's something magical about it, and so that's the most favorite part of it. With any organization, the less glamorous parts, the behind the scenes type work, are the things like the fundraising and strategic planning and what's the annual budget look like this year versus last year, and what are the trends and all of that. That's the less glamorous stuff, but necessary.
Yeah, it sounds like the sitting at the desk kind of things that you're probably looking forward to getting away from.
Yeah.
And you're not far from getting away from it.
No.
You're almost there. Guys, thank you for keeping with us. We are going to draw the raffle tickets here shortly. Another reminder, if you joined us halfway through, to get online and buy your Patagonia tea, send some funds to the Conservancy, come buy our tea, you could get a tea as well, get a book, or jump online and donate to the Little Miami Conservancy today, please. And we have Giving Tuesday coming up? Or we just missed Giving Tuesday?
Just have it.
You can give any Tuesday, is the great thing about Tuesdays. My favorite thing about
Well, and another great thing about people being able to give, another way for people to give, we have, the donation system there on our website, littlemiami.org, is to simply go out and rent a canoe or a kayak and paddle to Little Miami. And I say that's great because three of these top tier river outfitters along Little Miami, Scenic River Excursions and Loveland Canoe and Kayak and River's Edge Canoe, all contribute a portion of the money you pay to rent their canoes, contributed to the Conservancy. And that system's been in place for a couple of years now. It's made a world of difference. And we certainly thank the outfitters and thank you all who come out to the river and enjoy the river responsibly. And it's a wonderful resource.
Absolutely. I think that goes along with, vital role that they play. In addition to, we talked about at an early age reaching people and that awareness and that having a passion for the river. And you need to continually connect people with nature. Obviously, we believe in that pretty heavily, and same story when it comes to the different liveries and connecting people with the river and having a story to tell, getting off the river and having a passion for it.
The passion starts young, and that's one of the reasons we were so thrilled when one of our board members, Bill Schroeder, wrote Smallmouth Sunday. We interviewed a number of our founding fathers and mothers years ago on our 50th anniversary as the organization, and Lynn Helen Black from Indian Hill was one of the early people that really got things running and going for the organization, for the river. And she tells the story. I said, I'm interviewing her, and I said, well, I was born and raised on a farm up in Northwest Ohio, and I loved the woods, and we would literally pick every wildflower we saw out there with our cousins. And I said, what's your story, Ellen? And she said, well, in the second grade, we took a field trip to the little Miami, to the little Redbird Hollow, and the teacher said if we were really good, we might see a rainbow darter. And guess what? I saw a rainbow darter. It was just the cutest thing. And she was almost naive, but that's where it starts.
Yep. And we'll continue to hear stories like that. We got just a few more for you, and we'll wrap it up. Last month we talked about the success of businesses and communities that the river's helped creates so much more with health, recreation, culture, sustainability, and so much of this, that you yourself and the LMC attribute to a win-win kind of mentality that you take. I guess, can you tell us what that means to you?
Sure. Yeah. The years ago, when the organization was founded, there was a determination made that we were looking for win-win. We weren't going in to try to tell people, get out of here, move out of the watershed, or, we're here now, kind of a thing. It was, how can we find that right balance between economic development and river conservation? And 99, if you look hard enough, 99 times out of 100, you'll find that. And working with developers, for example, over the last 30 years, there's been a lot of development, close to the river, in large subdivisions, golf courses, all of that is going in. And when those ideas were starting to gel, we would sit down with that particular developer before the project even went public, and say, we're not here to stop the development, but we want to see the river protected. How can we put together this conservation plan, if you will, for this development? Can we set aside some areas along the river, protect those trees, plant more trees? Like I say, 99 times out of 100, you find that. The biggest successes that we've had have been along the river in terms of protecting these riverfront forest lands, have been with developers. And which is, it's counterintuitive. And it takes the involvement of county planning commissions and all that are on the same page. Some of the best county planning directors that I can remember, say up in Greene County, Bob Schroeder, when a developer would come, he'd say, that's great, we'll certainly consider that, but why don't you go talk to the Conservancy and then get back to us? I mean, that's gold, to be able to have that kind of interest and support. And then when they did, we would work out a deal where the riverfront got protected and then back away from the river, the developer could maybe do a little bit more economically and generate more income for the developer back away from the river. Maybe the density of lots was a little bit more than would have been allowed. So that kind of horse trading, if you will, and balancing all happens really at a meeting, at conference tables and so forth. All of that then is taken back to the public officials, and we say, we've worked it out. They're delighted that this whole balancing has been done, and they haven't had to, work through that as much.
That should be one of the bigger challenges, or do you see it as a bigger challenge? Just you see the development in some of our neighboring communities and things like that. Do you see that as?
Yeah, there will always be the challenges, and it gets back to staying in good communication, letting people, say from the development community, know that we're looking for that balance. We can find it. Working together, we can find it, and that's we need to keep that momentum going and keeping that message clear.
And I think the message too, and you kind of mentioned it, I mean, this is part of the win-win. So you're not here to not allow people to do things, but to show them the correct way to do things that will help protect their land and the future of the business that they're trying to build in the community while protecting the river.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Nice win-win there. So, kind of, well, one more, and then we'll kind of wrap things up. How can, a two-parter here, how can volunteers help further the mission if people want to get involved? And second part, well, we'll go with the volunteers.
Okay, sure. Well, the easiest way and the most fun way, and it leads to other things, is to get involved in like a cleanup. Get out on the river with people that want to help the river. Start those conversations going, from one canoe to the next kind of thing. That leads to more questions and how can we help? And if you have a background in aerial drone technology, or you have a background in chemistry, or you have this, and then all of that starts to come together so that we would like to help you out with your water quality monitoring program, or we'd like to serve on the board because we have some background in nonprofit management. So all of those things start to come about with something as simple as a river cleanup. So it's working with RRT has been great in terms of handling the sign-ups and all of that. We've worked with individual companies directly, which is always great.
I love that answer. It starts the conversation.
Start the conversation, and you will be
send me an email or jump online when we launch our cleanup dates, probably sometime in January or such, and sign up. What about a partner organization?
Yeah, I mean, if you've got organizations that we partner with, are organizations like the Council Land Trust. It's big in Cardinal, big in preserving land. How can we marry those together a bit so that it's another sort of win-win between the organizations. So that's worked out marvelous. They will talk with the farmer. Say the Council Land Trust up in the upper part of the room will talk with a farmer, and they say, well, here's this, and then we've previously talked with the Council Land Trust about looking in some riverfront protection into their farm easement. And then we have some enforcement of the way to do that. So it's just different ways of making it happen. There's a million different ways to make it happen. You just always have to be looking for.
We're going to draw raffle tickets here next. If we got some tickets drawn, how are we doing? Doing pretty good. We have winners. All right, we're going to announce some winners. First, Eric, obviously thank you for being here today, but I can't thank you enough for everything that you have done for our community, for the Little Miami River, and how important it is to us. We talk a lot, we talk today a lot. I feel like if I visit the Conservancy website, I could see the story of the Conservancy, the Thompson, and that legacy is clear and etched in stone. It's in history. What is the Eric Partee legacy? How do you see that?
Well, I never separate, and Glenn Thompson, the founder of the organization, always said it so well. It's never, this whole effort is not about an individual. It can't be, it shouldn't be, and it can't be, and it never is. What you see is as Eric out there talking to people, right behind me is a very active board, very active, supportive membership of several hundred members that support us financially, companies, local officials that support the concept. So, unfortunately, I always think about Payne Maynard at Cincinnati Zoo. People say, "Well, he's the zoo." He is the visible face of the zoo and the leader in a lot of ways. But there are so many people behind the scenes that really make it happen. So it's a joint effort.
Of course, a modest response. Of course, so many successes that you can name, and of course that we'll remember all of your work, hard work towards. So super appreciate that, guys.